Someone asks you a simple question: what do you actually want to do tonight? What do you actually want out of this relationship? What do you actually want to do with your life? And something in you goes quiet. Not thoughtful quiet, blank quiet. You can tell them what everyone else wants. You can predict what would make the room comfortable, what answer would avoid conflict, what choice your partner or your parents or your boss would prefer. But the question of what you want specifically without reference to anyone else, that one stalls out completely. This isn't indecisiveness, and it isn't a personality trait. Somewhere along the way, you stopped practicing the actual skill of wanting things for yourself. And there's a very specific reason that skill quietly atrophied without you ever noticing it was happening. Let's call her Kate. She's 31. Her friend asks where she wants to eat dinner, and Kate immediately says, "I'm easy, wherever works for you." Her friend pushes back gently, "No, really, what do you actually want?" And Kate feels a strange small panic. She genuinely doesn't know. She scans through a mental list of what her friend probably likes, what's convenient, what wouldn't be too much to ask for, before she can even get to the question of her own preference. This isn't limited to dinner. At work, when asked what kind of project she'd actually like to take on, Kate defaults to whatever seems most useful to the team. In her relationship, when her partner asks what she wants for her birthday, she says sincerely, "Honestly, I don't need anything." Not out of humility. She genuinely doesn't have an answer ready. One night alone, Kate tries an experiment. She sits down and tries to write out honestly what she wants, not what she should want, not what would look good, not what anyone else would approve of. She stares at the blank page for a long time. Nothing comes. Not because there's nothing there, but because the muscle that would normally reach for that answer hasn't been used in years. If you've ever found "what do you want" harder to answer than almost any other question, if your first move is always to calculate everyone else's preference before considering your own, this isn't a character flaw. It's the predictable result of a very specific pattern. Here's what's actually happening. For a lot of people, wanting things clearly wasn't safe or useful to practice growing up. Maybe your preferences were consistently overridden. Your want didn't matter as much as what a parent decided was best, appropriate, or convenient. Maybe expressing a clear want was met with dismissal, mockery, or the implication that you were being selfish or difficult. Maybe you grew up in a household where someone else's mood or needs took up so much space that your own preferences simply never got asked for, let alone answered. Whatever the specific mechanism, the underlying lesson was the same. Attending closely to what other people want is safe and rewarded. Attending closely to what you want is, at best, irrelevant, and at worst, risky. So your attention, over thousands of small repetitions, gets trained outward. You become extraordinarily skilled at reading a room, anticipating needs, sensing shifts in other people's moods. Meanwhile, the internal skill, noticing and naming your own wants, simply never gets the practice it needs to develop. This isn't a permanent trait, it's closer to an unused muscle. And like any unused muscle, when you finally try to use it, it doesn't respond immediately or clearly or with confidence. It responds with exactly what Kate experienced staring at that blank page. Silence, because the pathway was never built. But here's the part almost nobody says out loud. Not knowing what you want often isn't really about a lack of preferences. It's frequently a form of protection. If you never clearly identify what you want, you never have to risk clearly not getting it. An unspoken want can't be denied in the same devastating way a spoken one can. Staying vague keeps you safe from the specific disappointment of asking directly and being told no, or worse, being ignored. There's also a subtler layer. For people who grew up needing to stay attuned to someone else's needs for their own safety or belonging, wanting something for yourself can carry an old, barely conscious sense of danger, as if focusing on your own desire means taking your eye off monitoring everyone else, which once felt necessary for staying safe or staying loved. This is why simply being told, "just figure out what you want," rarely works. It's not a motivation problem. It's that the actual cognitive and emotional pathway for generating and trusting your own preferences was never built out because for a long time building it wasn't safe and building it wasn't rewarded. This shows up in different forms. There's the person who can spend hours helping a friend decide between two job offers, weighing every factor with total clarity, but goes completely blank trying to decide anything comparable for their own life. There's the person who realizes, well into a long relationship, that they've never actually asked themselves if this is what they want, only whether it seems reasonable, whether their partner is a good person, whether leaving would be justified enough to explain to others. There's the person who, when finally given real freedom, an open weekend, a choice of any restaurant, a fully flexible schedule, feels not relief, but a strange, disorienting anxiety, because unstructured freedom requires exactly the skill that was never developed. In every version, the pattern is the same. The machinery for reading other people is fully built and constantly running. The machinery for reading yourself was quietly left unfinished. Here's the twist most people never consider. The goal isn't to suddenly demand instant clarity about big life-altering wants, your dream career, the perfect relationship, your life's purpose. That's actually the hardest possible starting point, and expecting fluency there first is like trying to run before you've ever walked. The real shift starts with rebuilding the muscle at the smallest possible scale. Not, what do I want from my life, but do I actually want tea or coffee right now? Not, what do I want from this relationship long term, but did I actually enjoy that conversation or was I just managing it well? Small, low stakes, frequent repetitions, where the cost of getting it wrong is essentially nothing. Each time you pause and genuinely check in, not what's convenient, not what avoids friction, but what you actually notice yourself preferring, you're laying down a small piece of a pathway that was never built. Over time, and only with repetition, that pathway gets easier to find, faster to access, and eventually available even for the larger questions. So the next time someone asks you what you want, even something small, even something that feels silly to pause over, try resisting the automatic urge to calculate the easiest answer for everyone else first. Just for a moment, ask yourself the actual question, not what would be convenient, not what avoids disappointing anyone. What do you specifically actually want right now in this one small moment? You don't have to know the whole answer for your entire life. You just have to start practicing the question again, the way you would any skill that atrophied from disuse, not because something is wrong with you, but because you were never given the space to build it in the first place. You're allowed to build it now.